Dragons are famously one of the most iconic creatures in fantasy stories and legends across the world. From winged European dragons to their coiling Eastern cousins, every culture has their own interpretation of this mythical creature.
But in Dungeons and Dragons, they tend to be pretty similar across the board. Wings, claws, likely a breath weapon or two, with the only variation being in their color and respective elemental affinities. So this month, we wanted to introduce you to a few new dragons to bring some variety to your draconic encounters.
Hello, one and all. I'm Andrew,
And I'm Andrew.
artsmith and wordsmith of the Mithril Canvas, where we create homebrew items, monsters, and more for you to use in your D&D 5th edition campaigns.
While dragons in D&D do vary in terms of flavor, most of them follow a pretty standard template. So for Smaugust this year, we wanted to create some dragons that were a little more unique both in flavor and function.
Without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the first of our creations. Many dragons pride themselves on their strength, flaunting and boasting their mighty claws and terrible fangs to those around them. But in the underbelly of society, deep in the shadows, lurks a different type of draconic entity. A puppet master with eyes and ears everywhere one could imagine. A being with thousands of crows and ravens at its beck and call, the Crowfather sits idly by as long as its flock is kept safe from harm, and its commands are carried out. Those foolish enough to slight such a being find themselves facing not only the might of the dragon itself, but its family. As such, areas falling under the rule of a Crowfather quickly learn not to harm any corvids they see, for it is said that the Crowfather's grudge can outlast generations. The concept of the Crowfather came from the idea of crows and ravens holding grudges against those who harmed them. The idea grew from there, and eventually we thought of a dragon that ruled over all of the corvids in its own territory, and would exact revenge against anyone who harmed any of its flock. Just like you would likely receive retribution for harming a member of certain criminal organizations. All the while, its family is pinching coins and jewels and other shiny objects to add to the Crowfather's coffers, almost forming its own thieves' guild that nobody can trace.
Just like how corvids in real life have an interest in shiny objects, we thought it would be appropriate if this dragon's hoard was not only a collection of coins and valuable gems, but all manner of random polished objects. It doesn't care about the actual value of any individual item in its collection, but rather its shininess and luster. For example, the Crowfather would value a polished steel shield over a tarnished silver ring, regardless of how valuable it actually was.
To illustrate its connection with its flock, we've given the Crowfather many abilities that allow it to both protect its family as well as enforce its rule. It can see through the eyes of any corvids under its command and even speak through them, allowing the Crowfather to relay messages and communicate from afar. It could even speak through a crow or ravenfolk party member in a terrifying display of control.
This allows for the Crowfather to introduce itself in a number of ways to the players once they enter its territory. Maybe a seemingly ordinary crow approaches the party and begins speaking to them about a proposal it has. And if they choose to accept, coins rain down from above as a flock of ravens shower them with an advance payment.
Or maybe your players need to spy on someone, but their impenetrable fortress presents some complications. They could simply request aid from the Crowfather, who is happy to strike a deal, so long as they don't mind being in its pocket.
We felt that this ability allowed for lots of creative storytelling potential, as well as a bunch of ways to incorporate the dragon into a storyline where it could range from being an ally to a deadly host. After all, crows and ravens can be befriended if you show them respect.
In addition to their interest in shiny objects and their abilities to hold grudges, crows and ravens are known for being ill omens.
To reflect this, the Crowfather has a unique take on the standard frightening presence of other true dragons in D&D. Instead of frightening a creature and preventing them from moving closer, the Crowfather places a curse on all creatures who can see it, reducing their attack rolls and saving throws by 1d4 until the end of the dragon's next turn.
It essentially casts the Bane spell in an area around itself, only lasting one turn, but protecting itself from attacks and making it easier to harm its attackers by increasing the likelihood of them failing their saves. The Crowfather's breath weapon comes in the form of a thunderous caw, which deals massive thunder damage. And if a creature in the cone fails its save by 5 or more, it becomes dazed until the end of its next turn, forcing it to choose between moving or taking an action, and being unable to take bonus actions or reactions.
In addition, the Crowfather can transform into a gargantuan swarm of ravens, essentially turning itself into a flying stage hazard that your players will have to avoid, unless they want to get picked apart by piercing and necrotic damage.
Finally, whenever a creature damages the Crowfather or a member of its flock, the dragon can use its reaction to put a hit out on the offender, giving itself and all their corvids under its command advantage on attacks against it for the next minute. So, if you cross the family, you're gonna pay a hefty price.
To further fit in with the mob boss flavor, Crowfathers usually set their nests up in places that are intentionally hard to find to keep themselves from prying eyes, rarely leaving unless matters are very serious or the family is threatened.
It's also quite obvious when you enter a Crowfather's territory because you're suddenly going to feel a sense of unease, as all the birds stare in your direction. The sky darkens overhead, blocking direct sunlight as the environment within 5 miles of the dragon's lair becomes very gloomy and depressing.
Additionally, your players will find that their fortune has taken a turn for the worse as the magic of the dragon's territory will hinder their ability to re-roll their dice. So if you're sick and tired of your halfling players or the lucky feat, you can sweep the rug out from under them as they realize that one of their most reliable abilities has just become useless.
Overall, the Crowfather is an ominous presence that makes for a great shadowy villain, or potentially an intriguing patron that may take a shine to your party, so long as they respect the family.
Amongst the lush and vibrant forests, legends speak of a small and playful being that flits amongst the leaves and branches, only showing itself on rare occasions. Those fortunate enough to encounter a Grove Speaker are met with a jovial and almost childish demeanor, one seemingly unbefitting of a dragon with such a grand title. But to cross a Grove Speaker is to face the wrath of nature itself, as the forest comes alive at the behest of its guardian to strike down those who would harm it. Armed with all manner of tricks and tactics to trip up any potential assailants, Grove Speakers are more than capable of incapacitating their foes, leaving them helpless against the assault of bark and branch that fall upon them. Conversely, earning the trust and friendship of one of these impish dragons is to guarantee not only safe passage through its territory, but to gain a lifelong friend. For the Grove Speaker, we really wanted to make a small dragon, one lacking in size but able to punch well above its weight class and present a real challenge to higher level parties. Once we started conceptualizing a forest-themed dragon, we also realized that it was a good opportunity to make a dragon that doesn't fight like most other dragons do, flying by and either using their breath weapons or claws. We wanted a dragon that could present an entirely different type of encounter where it brings the forest to life against its enemies.
Very Lord of the Rings Last March of the Ents, and similarly would create a scenario where a party that has decided to fight a Grove Speaker now has to contend with the power of an entire forest.
The Grove Speaker's actual abilities are not focused on damaging its foes as much as disabling and immobilizing them. With a plethora of spells like Entangle and Spike Grove, the Grove Speaker can root its enemies in place, or even knock them prone with its cone tail, after which the trees that it has brought to life will surround and pummel its enemies into submission.
Even a decently high-level party will have trouble with the sheer number of awakened trees the Grove Speaker can summon, all the while having to deal with control spells that are hindering their movement and granting advantage on attacks against them. At some point, it just becomes a war of attrition, and if the party isn't able to take the dragon out quickly, they'll find themselves buried in bark.
And that's made much harder with how nimble the Grove Speaker is, able to fly out of reach without provoking opportunity attacks, teleporting from tree to tree, and having advantage on hiding in its natural habitat. The Grove Speaker isn't going to stand its ground against a barbarian when it could watch from afar, tripping his enemies up and watching them get bashed in by the forest itself.
We also wanted to give the Grove Speaker more connection to its forest than just bringing trees to life, so it's also capable of healing creatures using its saliva, which is especially effective on plant creatures. In this way, the dragon plays a support-type role in combat, both as a healer and as a disabler, keeping its allies healthy and its enemies in check.
But if things ever do get a little bit hairy, the Grove Speaker is capable of drawing on energy from the forest to heal itself, as though it is drawing on the actual vitality of the trees around it. It's definitely a last resort, and not something that it's happy to do, but we wanted to give it a way to restore its HP without mythic actions or something similar to that.
Having said all that, a Grove Speaker will likely be a friendly NPC that can help your players if their adventures happen to take them into a large forest. which is a pretty common environment in most campaigns.
And if you do introduce a Grove Speaker, it's a fun chance for role-playing as the dragon isn't interested in riches or treasures, but stories and souvenirs of grand adventures. Either having your players try to regale the dragon with a particularly badass moment from the campaign, or giving us something interesting they've collected is an opportunity for development. And based on what they present the Grove Speaker, it may be so pleased that it aids them on their journey.
A dragon with command over an entire forest is certainly a great friend to have, and has lots of ways to incorporate it into your campaign. Down the line, maybe the Grove Speaker calls on your party for help, as local settlements start to encroach on its land and are cutting down the trees, which are essentially both its horde and its friends all in one. It could present the party with a tough choice to make, where development of the area is underway at the expense of the Grove Speaker, who is unwilling to give up ground to those intruders.
Or perhaps your big bad's plans are starting to come to fruition, and you ask the Grove Speaker to call upon the forest to help you siege their castle. Doing so could incur heavy costs to the forest itself, but if the party can convince the dragon to help them, it would swing the tide in their favor. All in all, we think the Grove Speaker is a fun addition to any campaign that has a party trekking through the woods, giving a moment of levity for them to interact with a being that just wants to enjoy some company and defend its home.
We hope you like the Crowfather and the Grove Speaker. Let us know what you think about them in the comments below and how you would introduce them into your campaigns. You can find the Google Docs for both dragons linked in the description below, and if you're subscribed on Patreon, you'll have access to their full-res artwork along with a PDF of their stats for easy use.
And be sure to subscribe, as we'll have more videos coming down the line. And if you like what we do here, consider joining our Patreon, where you can get more monsters, subclasses, and printable item cards for your campaigns.
Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you again in the next video.